Hello everyone, Jared here, and in today's video, we're continuing our trip throughout China by leaving Guilin via the high-speed rail and heading to our next city, Changsha. So one thing I decided to do on this train was to take you to the meal car. I'll show you what it looks like. And here it is, the meal car. As you can see, it looks very similar to what you would find on a rail car in the US, with a wide variety of snacks available for purchase, whether it's from the trolley on the side or at the counter up front, where they also have pre-packaged meals if you're interested in buying one of those. They have a menu on the side listing the various dishes that they offer, and once I decided on one, I took it back to my seat and sat on down. So once I peeled off the top, inside was my vegetarian meal. So while I was eating that, we passed by a lot of fields and hills before eventually crossing a river and entering into the city. And after a quick stop at the restroom at the train station, we took a taxi directly to our hotel and decided to walk around and check out the malls nearby, where we encountered this interesting sight of employees doing some dance routine. But anyways, after that, we went to this restaurant you see right here, where we ended up getting these. Some delicious shaved ice dishes. This is the one that my father got, which was the one you saw in the poster. Here's what he thought of it.
It's really good. It has almost a caramel and peanut type sauce, and actually shaved ice is done in such a way it feels as if it was almost sponge cake. This is totally bizarre and different, and very good.
I, on the other hand, elected to get this. One covered in matcha powder and green tea mochi, which was just as good as his. So, that was pretty much it for our day one, and on day two, we got up early to head into a line to go see the Hunan Provincial Museum. Our first full day in Changsha, and we are in a very long line to get into the Hubei Provincial Museum. I recommend you come here early so you don't have as much of a line or as hot weather as we have right now. But at least there's shade all the way to the museum. Or so I thought. Actually, once you get out front of the museum, there's a whole lot more waiting, and it ended up being really hot, and we were there feeling miserable for quite a while before eventually getting in. After an hour-long wait, finally inside of the Hunan Provincial Museum. It's a very hot line outside. No shade after the first 10-15 minutes, and then you're in line for the next 45. So if you're going to come, I don't recommend summer again, but at least we're inside finally. And once we were inside, we were not happy about seeing all the people ahead of us in lines waiting to go up the escalators. This museum was absolutely packed. In fact, I don't think I'd ever been to a more packed museum in China, because even when we went to our first exhibit on Hunan history and culture, there was hardly any room for us to walk around inside. You were also lucky if you were able to get up next to something, because people would be standing around them for a long time without ever letting other people by. Now, this could also be a factor of simply being the summer when everyone's outside and able to travel during the holidays. But maybe not, because this seemed to be an issue unique to this museum. Anyways, despite all that, we were actually able to see quite a bit inside the exhibits. The first of which we happened to come across was about the mass exodus from northern provinces to the south, from the very first dynasty, the Qin, and onwards, with displays of various goods and weaponry that people brought down south with them over the centuries. And this group also includes many minority groups that we've talked about in other videos, such as the Miao. And so they have a few examples of their cultures here on display as well, such as the embroidery and clothing that you've seen a few times already if you've watched some of my other videos. And despite there being quite a few pieces of jewelry here, and a little bit dedicated to religion as well, nothing really stood out compared to what we found at other museums that highlighted ethnic minorities across China. But I suppose it's still a good introductory museum to get to know a little bit about them. And after that was my favorite section of the entire museum, focusing on the ancient Chu Kingdom, which came to an end 2,200 years ago, when the first emperor Qin Shi Huang united all of China. Now, why is this my favorite? Well, that's because the Chu Kingdom was a master of lost wax casting. from which they were able to make a wide variety of intricately designed bronze artifacts, whether it was pots, urns, or even animals. The level of craftsmanship that's involved in these pieces is often better than what you'll find in works centuries after its collapse. And I think I'll just be quiet and show you a few more of these, and allow you to appreciate them a little better. So, what do you think? Do you understand why those are my favorite works from China now? If you also liked them, don't worry, because I have a lot more coming up in a future video when we go to Wuhan to see the Hubei Provincial Museum, where there's a lot more of that. But anyways, after seeing a few more artifacts that were excavated from tombs across the centuries, the next exhibit after this focused on the dress of the Song Dynasty around 1,000 years ago, where clothing was actually fairly simple compared to earlier dynasties. But what I thought was most amazing was actually being able to see how many garments were well preserved after such a long period of time. But that's because most of what you're seeing here is silk, which preserves a lot better than a lot of other traditional fabric materials. Although probably my favorite piece here was the final one, a pillowcase. I wonder what story the image on its face is portraying. And after that, we were off to the next hall highlighting more recent pottery, mostly from the Song and Ming dynasties and onwards, so about 700 to 500 years ago. And once again, here are just a few highlights. Now what's this last one, you might ask? This giant white block? Well, that's a porcelain pillow. I can't imagine that that's comfortable to sleep with. Then following that was the painting and calligraphy exhibition, and most of the paintings that were in this section were from the final dynasty or even modern times. So I didn't really stay too long in here to look at them all. But then, just like every other museum around China, there was one floor dedicated to the People's Republic of China's history, which, also just like in many other museums, highlights the war against the Japanese during World War II. And that was the last thing before our final and main exhibit, known as the Mawang Dui exhibit, which highlights a mummy of an individual known as Xin Jue, dating from the Han Dynasty, which is around 2,000 years ago. The site itself, which is a little bit outside of Changsha, was actually excavated in the 1970s. The site consisted of the tombs of 3 people. Xin Jue's tomb was by far the best preserved of the 3, with most artifacts still intact, such as all these different lacquerware goods that I'm showing you here. And not only that, there were quite a few surprises as well. There was a lot of silk that managed to be saved as well, such as these old tapestries, as well as pillowcases used to cover those porcelain pillows that I showed earlier. There were even some silk book fragments that were found inside of the tomb as well. But perhaps most surprising for me was seeing these maps that were incredibly detailed despite being over 2,000 years old. These are among the oldest known map fragments that still remain in China today. But hey, maybe you're not a map fan quite as much as me. There were also a lot of silk garments that were well preserved inside the tomb as well, that they put on display here with backlights helping to illuminate the garments so that you can see the colors in full, the last of which easily being the most impressive. Further into the exhibit, they start to show you the various coffins that the bodies were found buried inside of, which included multiple layers of different materials, before leading to an area where you could climb on down and see the mummy for yourself. Unfortunately, when I was at the bottom and wanted to look at the mummy, I wasn't allowed to have my phone to take a picture. So, if you want to see it, you'll just have to come and look at it yourself, or find pictures of it online. Anyways, that was pretty much it for our time here at the museum, and as you can see, it was crowded even when we were leaving. So, next for us was heading off to this place, the Silk Embroidery Museum, which we had a little bit of a hard time trying to find online. And once I was inside, I was immediately blown away by the sheer volume of works that are along its many walls, and also shocked by the complete lack of people, which was the opposite of where we had just been. Every single piece of artwork that you see hanging on the walls is in fact not a painting, but crafted with silk. And not all of the works feature traditional Chinese culture. Many of them actually feature a lot of Western motifs as well. But what I really appreciate is how they can make these works appear to pop out at you, almost like they're alive, just like in the case of these fish here. Just look at all the individual threads within these fish. Can you see all those lines? I can't imagine how long it took to craft these. Most of what you see on the walls are actually for sale, and if you end up liking something like one of these, you can come here and probably buy one yourself. But they are rather expensive, and so rather than actually take any of these with me, one thing I actually decided to do instead was take some pictures of them, so that I can remember what some of them looked like. And because of that, you get to see what some of them look like too. So here you go. Enjoy seeing them from afar and up close. You know, a couple of these I liked so much that I actually made them into the background on my phone, such as this one here. And they also have rooms where there are some more that are a little smaller, which happen to be much more affordable if you are willing to pay for them. The cheapest kind comes in these round frames, which sell for around $100 US, so still not entirely cheap, but you may just find one that really attracts you, because they have a lot of different designs. Whether it's one with all of these types of flowers, or one highlighting tales from Chinese history, or perhaps famous scenic spots around China, such as this one of Fenghuang. They also have images of Mao if you'd rather have one of those as well, although I don't think that this type is particularly popular here in the West, and for good reason. And with that, our time here at the museum had come to an end. Well, that's museum number 2 for the day. Now, I guess it's off to see what else we can still do here. Maybe get lunch. So, we took a taxi back near our hotel to a major tourist walking street in the heart of Changsha. Now, we thought that as a tourist street, it was going to be a little more traditional for some reason. Don't know why, but it ended up being a major shopping area where there were pretty much just a lot of popular brand stores for clothing and food that you would find in any other city. But there were a couple notable exceptions. We're in the big walking street here in Changsha, and so far it looks pretty empty, except for this. The same tea shop that you see everywhere in Changsha. That is the only one that has lots of people. This chain was absolutely everywhere in Changsha. You could not go one block without finding it on at least 2 or maybe even 3 different corners. and it was always packed all throughout the city. There would always be a line. And the funny thing about its name in English is that it was translated as sexy tea. So, if you want to go find your own, you'll have to look up sexy tea if you want to find it anywhere outside of Changsha and in a Western country, because I know it's opened up locations in other parts of the world now. And because it seemed so popular, I knew I had to get one to try it. So, here's what I thought.
Just got my first sexy tea, and we're gonna go ahead and try it. It tastes creamier and a little floury, but it's not as sweet as most other kinds. It doesn't taste as like they put in as much sugar. Overall, I can see why people would like it, but I still can't understand quite why it's on every single corner. There's another one right behind me in this too.
We decided we'd count how many of these we'd find throughout the rest of the days while we were in Changsha, and eventually, I think we counted over more than 40 within about a 5-block radius. So there are plenty. And now that we'd had something to drink, it was time to move on to find something to eat. And so we went inside of a food court where we saw a few things that looked like they might be good to try, such as pot stickers, vegetable bowls, with ingredients that you could choose to put in them yourself. But there was also plenty that was not quite what we would want. Now, you have more common types of seafood, such as your lobster and crabs, but also little turtles. And that's not the only strange thing. There were a whole lot of bugs, as well as tarantula, larvae, and other creatures, like snakes. Now, I don't know who would want centipedes, but if you want to go ahead and try that, you can definitely do that here in Changsha. I don't actually know if I saw someone eat one of these while I was walking around here, but I guess if you're up for a dare and you happen to be in Changsha, you might as well go ahead and try some of this. I mean, I've tried some larvae before, you know, that giant kind you see on the stick right here in front for a second, that kind. And I can tell you, it's not actually that bad. Just be careful that you see how it's cooked at least before you decide what you're going to eat, because who knows how long some of this stuff's actually been sitting out there as well. So, if none of that made you feel like you wanted to eat something, how about some of these bowls with an assortment of various intestinal ingredients and other unknown items? Doesn't that sound great? So, hopefully understandably, we ended up losing our appetites and walking out of there, and just checking out the funny names of shops that were nearby, before moving on and seeing what else we could find nearby that offered some food for us. And eventually, we came across another mall, and after checking out what was on the numerous floors all throughout the building, where we noticed on 2 separate floors they once again offered that same sexy tea drink chain, we ended up at this Thai restaurant.
We decided to go ahead and stop inside of a Thai restaurant. Haven't done this since I've actually come to China this time, but it has a very unique theme, especially for the chairs, so I'll let you see what that looks like.
Now, when I think of a Thai restaurant, I don't particularly think about chairs that have bunny ears or antlers, or this general theme throughout the restaurant either. Maybe the ceiling is the closest that it would come to resembling something that would be from Thailand. But these chairs, not from my experience with restaurants at least. And we had to wait a long time to get our food. But in my case, it was worth it for this beef dish that you see right here.
That is some good beef. Always appreciate when there's good quality beef in China.
And once we were done with the restaurant, we continued looking around the mall, seeing the various shops that they had all around, this being the first time I'd seen a pet store at a mall in China, before moving on and checking out even more things at the mall, like these little pastries. Eventually, dinner time came, and we ended up getting some flatbreads that were made by hand and cooked inside of this oven. I wish I had some footage of it to show you what they looked like when they were done, but unfortunately, all I can show you is what's at the top of this menu here. So, that's pretty much it for our time here in Changsha, and I hope you're looking forward to the next video, because next time we're off to Wuhan for a short day stop before heading to our final destination of the trip, Xiangyang. But that'll have to wait until later next week. First, it's going to be a little bit of Wuhan for you to see. So, I hope you're looking forward to seeing a little bit of where I spent the majority of my time in China last year. So, until next time. Thank you again for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Also, please share this channel with others so we can make the channel grow together as I continue to put out more videos.